So you see something?
I see your window. Very
Okay, so
interesting shaped window.
so obviously I have this as well. There, that's better.
Great.
Yeah. So,
I'm curious when you're looking at situations like this and looking at the responses being taken at the state and the federal level, what do you use as a precedent for a disruption to the workforce that is this serious, a spike in unemployment that's that large?
well, it's partly that it's large and sudden. The large and sudden happened in 2008 too.
Hmm.
It's partially the origins of it. Normally, so for example, in 2008, if anybody had been watching carefully, they would have known that there were cracks and there were vulnerabilities. Um, and I assume that, we still have cracks and vulnerabilities, but this wasn't coming primarily from the cracks and vulnerabilities. This was coming from, uh, a pandemic in China. Um, so the origin is health. Um, and we're more vulnerable to something like this because we were so poorly prepared to cope with the health problem. And, a lot of people are just at the edge in ways that may not have been true in, I don't know, let's say 1970.
Hmm.
What makes it different is increasing growth of underlying fragility and just this out of the blue sort of nature of the disruption, which is going to require a massive public health mobilization in the very short term. In the longer term, you would like to address some of the underlying economic vulnerabilities too.
Where do those vulnerabilities, that fragility, where does all that come from? Like, what are the structural issues that you're referring to here?
Oh, so for example, the part-time workers who are paid by the hour, who never know how many hours per week they're going to work, or the people who, if they quit a job at McDonald's in some cities, for example, or let's say more generally at a fast food place in some cities, they would realize that they had signed a non-compete agreement so that they wouldn't be able to take a similar job at Burger King. Um, and something like 20% of workers are subject to these non-compete agreements now across the country, which means it's very difficult to go around and shop your skills and try to find a better deal for yourself. Um, and A big part of it is that workers are not protected. The decline of unions in the 70s and the 80s. A lot of the fragility is coming from the very, very low margins that people have to keep in the face of international competition. And the safety nets have been kind of shredded so that if you lose a job or you lose hours or you're having trouble keeping your business afloat, um, there are not as many alternatives as there used to be.
So I'm curious where that leaves a worker who's being affected by all these systemic forces right now in the midst of this crisis. And, maybe even if they get some kind of new access to unemployment that they didn't have before, what if that doesn't pay all their bills? Like where does that leave someone in that situation right now?
If it doesn't pay all their bills, you would hope that the people they owe money to would say, okay, we're going to forgive debts for a little while. If you have a car loan or if you just bought a truck or something, or if you have a mortgage, hopefully they would say, okay, we'll give you a grace period. We understand things are kind of rough right now, and it's not nobody's fault. So hopefully they would give you a grace period, but if they don't, um, call your brother, call your dad, call your mom, and if that doesn't work, then I don't know what you're going to do.
The reason I ask is that, things you spoke about, stuff like loan forgiveness and things like that. I've heard from some readers, and I've wondered this at times myself, those of us who aren't economists, why can't we just press a pause button on everything? Why isn't there a mechanism in place where we could just say, yeah, we're not collecting debts, we're not paying rent or mortgages, and why can't the economy just be paused in that way?
Because the economy is pretty highly leveraged. What you pay back to somebody else is revenue that they need to pay somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw what happened in 2008 when that wasn't there, when people began to default on mortgages, then the whole house of cards just fell down.
I guess I'm curious, kind of looking forward. I know it's hard to make predictions, and we don't currently know how long this crisis is going to go on for. When we do kind of turn a corner and there's been this major disruption, what kind of factors are we going to be looking at in terms of how we actually rebuild the economy afterwards, whether that's at the state level or the federal level? How do we come back from this?
Well, there are going to be 2 or 3 different parts of it. Number one, we have to start taking public health more seriously, because these pandemics they're happening with some regularity now. Trump disbanded a pandemic council that Obama had set up that was supposed to handle this sort of thing, and Obama had set it up after SARS and H1N1 and all those other things. And Trump evidently decided it was dispensable. So that structure needs to be revived. We need to look at how we're supplying hospitals with equipment and testing materials and so forth. So the public health element of it is one, but in the aggregate economy, there are 2 things going on. Number one is the drop in demand from people who aren't sure where their next paycheck is coming from, or whether unemployment insurance will be large enough and last long enough and show up soon enough that they can pay their bills. So that's part of it. And the third piece of it, public health aggregate demand, is that on the supply side, the supply chains have been kind of shattered because, take, for example, some medicines. Many medicines now are manufactured in China. And a lot of the container boats are coming back without the meds and the other things that are manufactured in China, because Chinese workers haven't been going to work as much. And American workers haven't been going to work as much.
Right.
So besides the kind of stocking up and getting ready for quarantines and panic buying that people are doing, you've got the fact that this stuff isn't on the boat right now. And so those supply chains are going to need to be restructured.
So do you think that when we kind of come out on the other side of this, that the economy is going to look different in fundamental ways?
Things are going to feel fragile for a while. There's no question to me about that. Firms are going to be hustling to try to figure out how to protect themselves from whatever comes out of this. Maybe looking for bailouts, or saying, well, gosh, maybe we should have kept some more retained earnings rather than using them to do stock buybacks. I assume that corporate lawyers are going to be working overtime trying to figure out how to keep firms from being liable for anything that may happen. I don't know if people are going to be so fed up that they are going to be willing to look in different directions. Part of this uncertainty and insecurity, of course, is what fuels Bernie Sanders' campaign. It's also what fueled Trump's campaign. And depending on which side you're sitting on, one or the other of those looks more authentic to you. There's clearly a lot of discontent, and I don't know which way it's going to be channeled.
Well, thanks, Elaine, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I love your gloves, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.